Hello? Hello? Well, if you're hearing this, then chances are you're a fan of Five Nights at Freddy's too. Now, the Miracle Man wanted me to record a message for you to help you guys get settled in on your first part of this series. The game lore can tend to jump around a bit. Something about the bite of 87 and the purple guy killing a bunch of kids, blah, blah, blah. Now, that might sound bad, I know, but in all seriousness, there's really nothing to worry about. But let's not consider ourselves with the rest of the franchise right now. Let's just focus on getting through this first part. Your first part shouldn't be so bad. But considering that there are 10 plus games in the franchise that we are eventually going to go through, you can kind of imagine how long and crazy this series is going to get. Not to mention how horrifying those animatronics can get. And, yeah, they don't really tell you these things before you watch these videos. But the first part of this franchise shouldn't be so bad. So just make sure you hit that like button, make sure you keep that bell notification turned on, and make sure you hit that subscribe button when absolutely necessary. I'm trying to hit 1,000 subscribers here. Alright, enjoy the video. Thank you to whoever that was in the intro. You know what, we're just gonna forget about that. YouTube, what is going on, guys? It is yours truly, the Miracle Man, and today we are bringing a different kind of video, but in the same style of the Platinum Hunting Challenges. But today I wanted to take a look at a franchise that has been around for a long time, and I wanted to take you through each one of the games and show you my retrospective and how I felt about these games, the times. Did I play them? Did I platinum them? Did I get all the trophies for them? And what are the plans for the future of this Five Nights at Freddy's franchise? And more importantly, how do I feel about the movie? But to go through this entire franchise, of course we have to start with Five Nights at Freddy's 1, so we have to go back to where it all started, where the horror genre was changed forever, all the way back 9.5 years ago to August 8th, 2014, where we originally saw this trailer. Now, jumping into the early stages of FNAF 1, a lot of people, they attribute to FNAF's success to MatPat, to Markiplier, to Dawko, to Big Bugs, all these people that were originally doing the early Five Nights at Freddy's content and who did it first. This is actually a surprise to a lot of people because a lot of people actually don't know about this. And I was actually quite surprised because Ben the Scoopus and Markiplier, along with Yummy Mash, were the three people that actually really got me into Five Nights at Freddy's. But nobody really talks about Ben the Scoopus, and I think it's an absolute tragedy because even though he's not as huge of a YouTuber as those other guys were, he was still the first person that played Five Nights at Freddy's, so he's the first guy that started this journey for everybody. Ben actually ended up getting the game 2 days before the release of the first FNAF because at the time, Ben had played the game Chipper and Sons Lumber Company, which was Scott's original game before Five Nights at Freddy's. So as a little thank you for playing that game, he was able to get an early copy of FNAF 1, and he is actually the first person in the world to post a FNAF video. The early Five Nights at Freddy's games really relied on this power management system, where you had to learn the game on which areas that you had to keep an eye on. In Five Nights at Freddy's 1, it was Pirate's Cove. If you didn't keep an eye on Pirate's Cove long enough, Foxy would take into 4 different phases. One with the curtain being completely closed, the second with him peeking his little nose out, the third being fully stepped off the stage, and of course the fourth one is him running down the hallway. After you learn the things about Pirate's Cove, you really start to notice the ambience of this game, the static electricity in the background, the drowned out talking on the phone calls. So the biggest driving factor for this game is the animatronic characters.
The whole story revolves around these guys, and the entire franchise as a whole starts with animatronics. For those of you guys who don't know, I suffer from mechaphobia and submechaphobia, which if you guys don't know what that means, that is fear of animatronics that are underwater and not underwater. Meaning that I just have a fear of animatronics in general. I don't like how they look creepy, and that's not just FNAF doing that. I was afraid of Chuck E. Cheese, there was all kinds of other places I didn't like. I didn't like going on Universal Studios rides or Disney World rides just because the animatronics always looked so weird. But each animatronic is done extremely well and uncanny. I think what some of the later games suffer from is they just look too clean, in my opinion, later on, and they just move too fluently. But in the first game, you can see the wires, you can see the cracks in their bodies, you can see the atmosphere of these animatronics. In the first game, something that I don't think happens in as much in the later games is these actually felt like they could be real animatronics that could be at an actual Freddy Fazbear's Pizza if it existed. And that was actually a huge debate at the time, was Freddy Fazbear's a real place? There were photoshopped images of this place, there was all kinds of stuff that people were trying to figure out whether or not this was real. But the fun part about this stuff is figuring out where the screams come from. And that was my biggest curiosity when I started doing these videos, is that where did the screams come from? Where did the FNAF screams come from? Where did these sounds come from? Unfortunately, the answer for most of them is he just got them from a music sharing website where you can get sounds and all kinds of different things. And he just changed the sounds a little bit to make them more horrifying and creepy. But the FNAF jump scare one was slightly different in being that it actually came from a pre-registered source. And that being a movie known as Inseminoid that was released back in 1981. But the scene they actually take this scream from for FNAF 1 is this scene where the lady is actually giving birth to an alien. And when you compare the two sounds right next to each other, I gotta tell you, it's really, really hard to unhear it. We've talked about the sound effects, we've talked about the audio, we've discussed the animatronics and how each one of them looks, and we've even mentioned a little bit of Golden Freddy. See, here's the problem with these lore games, and this is where I want to get into this little detail, is that Scott only planned on making one FNAF game total. Meaning that he never planned on continuing the story after this game, which will and definitely lead into some lore gaps and holes later on. The first one being the Bite of 1987. You start out the game as a brand new security guard. You get a phone call. Now, up to night 4, the phone guy's been pretty consistent with his knowledge. He's told you the correct way to stop Foxy. He's told you the correct way to stop Bonnie and Chica. He even told you that Freddy doesn't appear on the cameras. He just comes out of nowhere, which is a thing that happens in FNAF. He is very hard to see and very hard to get to come off stage. And it doesn't happen until the later nights. Unfortunately, our poor security guard that was working before us. But that brings us to the point of this game, which is where we're at now. You play as a security guard known as Mike Schmidt, aka Michael Afton. And Michael Afton is essentially the security guard in this game, and that's all we know. We don't know any of the later details, yet. Not until the later games. So at this point in time, at the time of this game, all we knew was that he was the security guard known as Mike Schmidt. We didn't even know his real name was Mike Afton, but his name was Mike Schmidt, and he was working the night shift at Five Nights at Freddy's. Now, the way the lore goes in this, and it's going to be a little bit touch and go here, is that Mike originally worked at the first Five Nights at Freddy's way back when. The original one. He was a younger kid. He's the cause for the Bite of 1987. He's the cause of everything. If you guys are following the lore and already know about it, FNAF 1 actually takes place after FNAF 4 and FNAF 2. So FNAF 1 is actually the third restaurant in the saga, and Mike Schmidt is actually here trying to figure out what is going on. He already knows about the animatronics moving. He already knows about the dead kids, and more importantly, he already knows about the bite of 87. At this point in time, the story goes, William Afton, who is the co-founder of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza along with Henry, I have not learned his last name yet. Apparently you learn his last name in the books, but I have not learned his last name yet, but I'm reading through the books now. I'm really excited to get into those too, but I haven't learned his name yet, so we'll find out soon enough. But for now, we're just going to call him Henry. But this game actually takes place right after the bite of 87. This game actually takes place right after the bite of 87. If you consider the bite of 87 the actual bite. I know some people consider it the bite of 83 now, but I'm considering it the bite of 87 because that's what the lore states in the first game. We'll talk about it more when we get to Five Nights at Freddy's 4 on what I think is more true. But essentially, this restaurant was opened right after the bite of 87. Takes place sometime between 1988 and 1993. The bite of 87 happened, they shut the restaurant down, and immediately after there was another restaurant open. And just for timekeep's sake on this video, because it's already getting a little bit lengthy, we're just gonna go ahead and say that there were 5 kids that were lured into the back room by a yellow bunny costume and were killed by none other than William Afton himself. There's more backstory to that, and there's more that led up to that specific moment, but that is for later games. But when we get into the later games, the Night 6 and Night 7s, and even the custom nights, really amounted to more than they did in the first game. In the first game, Night 6, Night 7, and the custom night are just essentially extra modes. Whereas when you get to FNAF 2, you learn more details about the bite of 87, you learn more stuff, and even in FNAF 4, and you learn way more things when you play the later nights. But for FNAF 1, the extra nights are just that, extra nights. They don't add anything to the story. It's just a more intense, harder night. And it ends the same way as every other FNAF game ends. At the end of the week, you get fired for uncleanliness and overall bad odor. Now, besides that though, the lore of Five Nights at Freddy's 1 is pretty cut and dry. And like I said, guys, that is a story for another night and another journey. But that is the entire FNAF retrospective from my perspective. I never beat 2020 mode, so I don't have any knowledge on how hard that was. I am planning on doing a huge FNAF video in October. When we get closer to the movie, I'm going to be platinuming and 100%ing every single FNAF game, whether or not it has a platinum or not, except for Ultimate Custom Night, because I'm not that crazy. But every other FNAF game is going to be done. 1, 2, 3, 4, Sister Location, Pizzeria Simulator, Security Breach, Five Nights at Freddy's Help Wanted, you know. All that stuff is going to be done and 100%. That's going to be a fun video coming out in October. But it looks like my shift is almost over here, guys. We are currently at 5:58 here. So it looks like we've made it through our first night with the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise. We are officially done here, and yeah, that was a interesting journey to go back to this first game and kind of explain to everybody why I fell in love with this game in the first place and why I'm so terrified of it. Anyway, guys, I'm gonna get out of here, and remember, guys, if you're not playing the game for the platinum, the hell was that? You're playing the game wrong. I gotta go, guys.